Good morning. We are in Acts 11 today, and I want to call your attention to two lines that I think at first we're tempted to read as just throwaway little small details, but have profound significance for us today in the reading. So we're learning about this story, this moment in church history where the good news of the gospel, the message about Jesus is being spread all throughout the region, including among these Gentile people living in a city called Antioch. Jerusalem has heard about how the gospel message has come to these Gentiles living there, and they send a representative in the form of Barnabas, who's so excited by what he finds that he goes and gets his buddy Paul, and they come back, and that's where we're going to pick up the story in verse 26, the second part. They come back to Antioch, and here are the two lines. For a whole year, they met with the church and taught a great many people. And in Antioch, the disciples were first called Christians. Okay, let's talk about that first sentence. They stay with them for an entire year. It's easy to just gloss right over this sentence without realizing a whole year of Barnabas and Saul or Paul's life is dedicated to these Gentile believers who are just starting their relationship with Jesus. Why does it take a whole year? This is evidence of discipleship or spiritual formation in the early church. Barnabas and Paul know that these new believers need a mentor, a teacher, essentially a rabbi to walk with them and help them understand why their belief in Jesus ought to impact every area of their life. I imagine that part of what Barnabas and Paul are teaching these new believers are the spiritual disciplines, how to live in community with one another, what to do when there are disagreements, all of the things that Jesus taught all of us in the Gospels. As Hannah has talked about in her past 2 weeks of sermons, they didn't have the New Testament yet. And so what did they do? Well, rabbis and teachers like Barnabas and Paul would teach these new believers all of the things that Jesus had said, all of this new way of living as part of the kingdom that we have in the New Testament. It would be in the form of these teachers. And I think that's hugely significant for us, because if you're tempted to see your faith as just a cognitive thing, like you have belief in Jesus, therefore you're good, you check the box, you can move on, this calls that into challenge. Following Jesus is about the way that we live. And I think that is evidenced by the second sentence here. And in Antioch, the disciples were first called Christians. That title is so important. Why this title, Christians? Well, Christ was the Greek word that means anointed one. It was a way of talking about the Hebrew word Messiah. It essentially came to be synonymous. And Messiah was, of course, the long-awaited Savior that the Jews had been waiting for in the Old Testament. And it was who we believe to be Jesus. So Jesus is called Jesus Christ, not because that's his last name, but because it's a title, way of saying we believe that he is the long-awaited Savior come to rescue his people. And it's only after this year of meeting with Barnabas and Paul that this church in Antioch becomes known as Christians. If you've been reading the emails, you know I'm obsessed with N.T. Wright at this point, especially what he has to say in Acts. And I love the way he puts it. I want to read this here. The followers of Jesus were thinking and speaking in such a way that they were thought of as the king's people, messianists, and Christians. Do you see? The way that they live set them apart as unique. The way they live as followers of Jesus, how they did community together, how they spent their time, how they spent their money, their radical generosity, it marked them as different. And the only thing that they could associate with why they were different is that they were following Jesus Christ. They were the king's people, as N.T. Wright said. I think that's absolutely beautiful. It's a beautiful portrait of what it means to be a Christian. It's not just because we sign on the dotted line and say we believe about Jesus. It's about the way that we live. If someone was going to categorize your life based on how you live, what they see in how you live, what would they call you? What title would they give to how you live? And I think it's really challenging me this week to think about my life and what testimony do I give about what I believe with Jesus in my life? Would someone categorize me as being a king's person or a little Christ, in other words? This is the challenge of our faith. It's a lifelong journey that we are on to become more like Jesus. And if you want to know more about how to do that, let me know. I think it takes everything that we are, everything that we have, rewiring the way that we think about the world, what we do with our time, and how we live in community together. That's what it looks like to be a Christian. It's so much more than just a headspace thing. It is a way of life, and that is what we're seeing starting to emerge in the early church. So my hope for you this week is that you'll give that some thought. How much of your life is characterized or influenced by the faith that we believe in Jesus? And what does it look like for you this week to think of yourself as like a little Christ, or someone who believes so much in the way of life that Jesus offers that it begins to change radically every area of your life? Is there an area of your life that you want to keep separate from Jesus? I hope that this is encouraging to you. It's challenging to me for sure, but it's also encouraging. And I hope that you have teachers in your life who are like Barnabas and Paul, guiding you and mentoring you. If you don't have someone like that, email me and I will connect you with some people who can be that for you. We need each other. This is what the community of Jesus is all about, transformation, and we're in it for the long haul together. This is what I'm getting out of this passage. I hope it's encouraging for you. We'll see you back here tomorrow.